Welcome to The Exchange. I'm Dan Riley. The Exchange is a streaming internet talk show and podcast of interviews with noteworthy people about their lives, ideas, and current events. This week I sit down with Commercial Spaceflight Federation President Eric Stallmer. During our conversation, Eric talks about the history of humanity in space, companies that are trying to bring people into space, and the resurgence of the public's interest in pushing the boundaries of space exploration. Welcome to the show. Today I'm sitting down with Eric Stallmer from the Commercial Spaceflight Federation. Eric is the president of this organization. And Eric, first of all, thanks so much for taking some time to talk to me and let the listeners hear about your story.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
I appreciate being here.
I'd love to start by learning about how you got involved in CSF. What's your involvement been like, and how and when did you initially kind of get involved with the organization?
Well, I've always been in space. I started off in space. One of my earliest jobs when I came to Washington was with a trade association called the Space Transportation Association. I was there for about 6 years, and then I went to one of the companies that I represented, a software company from Pennsylvania, right outside the Philadelphia area, as we were talking about, called Analytical Graphics, AGI. A real cutting-edge type software company that did software for the space, defense, intelligence sectors, tracking objects, battle space management, space situational awareness, just kind of really fascinating stuff. And I ran their government relations department, and I did that for about 10 or 11 years or so. And the opportunity presented itself over at CSF, and the folks there called me. The former president was leaving and moving on. And so I met with them, and it was just the right time, to get in the business. And it's such an exciting time to be in the commercial space business. So I jumped on it. And that was back, September 1st of 14. And so I've been on the job going close to 6 months or 5 months, and it's been nothing short of exciting since day one.
And tell me a little bit about what CSF does. What's the mission, and what are the goals of the organization generally?
Well, so we're a trade association, and we represent about 52 different companies that have companies and also educational institutions that have a vested interest in the commercial space industry. We vary from companies on the ground, spaceports. We have about 7 different spaceports, converted airports or dedicated space fields, facilities that will launch either rockets, either vertically or horizontally with space planes. We have launch companies. We have several launch companies that are launching suborbital as well as orbital. Everyone knows SpaceX. SpaceX is one of our bigger ones. We have Virgin Galactic, which is intending to take tourists up to space, as well as X-Corps. They're both actually co-located south of here, down in Mojave. We have Planetary Resources, who are looking to mine asteroids. We have Blue Origin, which is a Jeff Bezos company that is building launch vehicles and planning on launching pretty soon. So it's just a whole cross section of people, business people, entrepreneurs that want to do things in space. And what we do as a trade association, we try to represent that commercial interest to the government and to other, not just exclusively to the government, but, from a public relations standpoint, but also from a policy perspective as well.
Mm-hmm. Where does the desire for humanity to go to space come from? And the 20th century was the century of us actually going into space. Talk to me a little bit about that history of us really knowing almost nothing about space, even maybe midway into the century, to us first going into space and then putting a man on the moon. Was there just an explosion in interest at some point during the 20th century, which has led to where we are today?
Yeah, I think in the mid 20th century, it was that manifest destiny that we can go beyond. What else do we need to see? We've conquered the earth in a way, and I don't mean that in a kind of a dictatorial way, conquering, but it was the idea of getting out and seeing and exploring. We're a society of explorers, and space was the obvious next choice. From the science fiction perspective, that really, I think, sparked a lot of the interest. From a science fiction perspective on what is it in Mars? Are we the only ones in this universe living? Or beings. And then to the moon, that it was close enough to touch, it seemed. And the space race, provided that for us, and putting a man on the moon, in short amount of time, from the time they started really launching rockets, in the mid 40s, till 69 of actually putting people, on the moon. And what I think, unfortunately, in society is I think society feels a little cheated. I think they saw that, hey, in 1969 we put a man on the moon. And if I'm a kid during that generation, I would have thought to myself, what could we possibly do after? What were we going to be doing in 1985? Or imagine the year 2000, the endless possibilities. And the year 2000 came, and what did we have to show for it? I mean, we made huge leaps and bounds scientifically. We had we have the space station, and the Russians had the Mir. We had the space shuttle program. All fantastic programs, and just tremendous leaps for humanity in advancing the space cause. But I think we could have done more, and I don't think we invested enough resources to do more. And I think as history has stated, the appetite kind of waned a little bit after we went to the moon. And I think there's a new generation of entrepreneurs that are saying, wait a minute, we should be doing a lot more, and they're in the catch-up stage. And those are the really exciting people that we have an opportunity to work with.
And you mentioned, we landed on the moon in 1969, and movies came out like 2001: and Space Odyssey, and it seemed like at that time, if you talk to young kids, they did have an expectation, or at least a belief of some sort, that they may have the opportunity to live to see the day when people would be traveling to space commercially or in much more common ways. What happened between then and now? Why is it that we're in the year 2015 and we're not there yet?
Yeah, there's a lot of theories, a lot of factors. The amount of money that was spent during the Apollo program was obscene. It was a significant part of the federal budget back then. I think in today's dollars, it would have been like 15%. Today's NASA budget is less than 1%. It's it's $18, $19 billion. So the funding wasn't there. The war in Vietnam, the huge cost of that, and just the economic recession and the limitation. I think the expectations of what the space shuttle could do, and what it really could do, and the cost. That would be, insert a number, but somewhere around $600, $700 million every time you want to put the space station up. It just became so cost prohibitive, and I think there just wasn't that desire, that huge desire or appetite to spend that kind of money. And that's what we're seeing now. The changes is at the commercial sector, that entrepreneurs are doing this, and they're putting their own money where their dreams are, and trying to realize those dreams.
Are they doing that because they remember being little kids and they were interested in space, or are they doing this for entrepreneurial reasons? Do they think they can make the economics work to actually make the investment in doing this worth their investment?
I think it's twofold. I think I should say it's both. One, I think they feel cheated out of, like this dream that, again, if you looked at historically about the progression, of the human spirit, it just in the 20th century from, the rise of the automobiles and soon, almost in parallel to, as the automobile industry was growing, as was the aviation industry and the barnstorming. And, by 27, we had crossed did a transatlantic flight, across the Atlantic. And, the amount of passengers, the increase of passengers, commercial passengers, just grew and grew, and the capacity of the planes and all these things. You look at that parallel in the automotive industry as well. In the space industry, well, we only, from 65 to, let's say, 2015, only 535 people have gone up to space. That's terrible. So as you were asking about these individuals, one, I think they were, I'm not going to guess people's age. I can take a little more liberties because some of these are men, but a Richard Branson probably was, 10, 12 years old during this time. Maybe Jeff Bezos, was like 5 or 6 years old. And they saw this, and they had these huge dreams, and they want to go there. They want to go to space. The idea of like making the entrepreneurship of making money, and all these guys have made their money. They've made billions. So I really don't think it's about the money. I think it's about presenting the human race, humankind, with opportunities, greater opportunities of exploration, and just an audacity to dream big and to really put these ideas, into reality. I met with Elon Musk. I think it was in 1999 or 2000. He came to Washington, and and this was when I was with the Space Transportation Association, and we were watching a hockey game in a suite, and he was telling me and some other lobbyists that he wanted to build a space company. He wanted to build a launch company. A lot of people were like, "Well, good luck with that. It's kind of hard. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it." And a lot of people had tried. And he stuck with it. And in 12, 13 years, look at the company that he's built and he's launching. He's taken on the federal government, on the big behemoths of Lockheed and Boeing who have dominated the U.S. launch industry. And he's taking them on, and he's winning it in some ways in the commercial sector, and he's really making it a truly commercial industry, and bringing the cost down of launching payloads to space. So is he going to make money off it? Sure, he's going to make money, but he's also doing bigger things, and as is Bezos, he's going to be doing, as well as Branson, and I don't know if you're familiar with Bob Bigelow, and what he's doing with the space hotels. I mean, there's huge things going on.
SpaceX, of all of them, at least in the last few years, seems to be the most publicly known company in terms of their activity of privatized space exploration or privatized space activity. How has he been able to do, like you said, it was only 12 or 13 years ago you were watching this hockey game with him. What has he done differently that's allowed him to be successful in a field in which so many others have failed?
He's challenged the mainstream. He's challenged the norm. That only big companies can do it, that it has to be, these government-run programs, that it has to be expensive. If you look at the traditional launch cost, from some of these launch providers and the cost that he's doing it at, I mean, it's a huge savings. And I think he's just, he's a disruptive technology. And people always kind of shrug off these disruptive technologies. But he's doing it the same thing, just a different way, and it's working. And I see that with a lot of the other companies that I work with, a lot of these suborbital Virgin and Blue Origin, as I mentioned before, and X-Core. They're doing suborbital Worldview. They're doing a program where with a capsule, and with a balloon, and bringing the balloon up to 100,000 feet. So it's thinking differently about how we've done things over and over, and so I think he's daring the establishment, and it's interesting to see.
And like we both mentioned a little bit, it seems like he's the most well known of the companies and the names that are involved in the space industry right now. Talk a little bit about what the differences are between what he's doing and what some of the other companies that you mentioned are doing, Virgin Galactica and some of the others. What are the main similarities and differences between the major players?
Well, I think what SpaceX has done is they have a product, to launch satellites and payloads, and they're evolutionary in that regard, and how they're building. They start off with a smaller rocket with Falcon 1, and then they moved up onto Falcon 9, and now with the capsules, and with the resupply of the contract to win the resupply of the space station, and now to bring passengers to astronauts up to the space station. So they're taking a step-by-step approach, and as are the others, but it's a different market per se. Like Virgin Galactic is looking at more of the suborbital. Right now, one of their projects is suborbital, bringing tourists to space as passengers to experience what only, as I said, only 500 and some odd people have had an opportunity to experience. So that that the methodology that they're using, incrementally. X-Core is doing a single passenger payload, where you have the experience of being the co-pilot in this Lynx vehicle that they're building and designing and building. And so there's and Blue Origin. Blue Origin has been unique because they've been kind of quiet about what they're doing. But I think if you just remember the name, you're going to hear some big things from them in 2015. So they've got quite an impressive facility out in Seattle. So it's going to be interesting.
And where are we in terms of the process of all of these companies? I mean, SpaceX is doing active activity in space. Are the rest of these just in the design phase, or are they actively taking people up into space? And if so, what are the price points looking like for people to actually get up into space?
Excuse me. It varies. So SpaceX is not yet for passengers, paying passengers. I mean, unless Uncle Sam is considered the payer. So I think Virgin Galactic is looking at about $250,000 for that experience. It's not just going to space, but it's the entire experience. I think X-Core and Worldview are looking at an experience of about $90,000. So those are kind of the price points of different, opportunities for each one. And there's a lot of people out there that'll pay that. And I'm excited about that. People are like, people naysay this, like, oh, it's only for the rich. It's only for the rich. Just like this plasma TV over here. That when that 42-inch, or probably smaller, 32-inch plasma TV came out, it's like $9,000. And there's people out there that went out and spent $9,000. I wasn't one of them. I waited about 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden it was $1,500 for a 42-inch. And now as the Super Bowl is upon us and all the huge sales, I saw like a 55 or 60-inch TV, and it was like $300 or something. So let those earlier folks bring the price point down, and that's what I think it's going to happen. And I think it's going to open up other markets as well. I think the microgravity market and the type of research that you can do in space in this microgravity environment is going to open up a lot of opportunities, and lines of revenue for companies.
What are the major hurdles that these companies, separate from their financial hurdles, are there governmental or bureaucratic hurdles that they're running into? And if so, what are the major ones that are running into?
There can be, and that's why you have a commercial spaceflight federation. We try to work very closely with a lot of these government agencies that are trying to regulate this industry. And we want, and if there's going to be regulation come down, we want the regulation to be there to help foster the industry, not to stymie it, not to to squelch it. Like historically, sometimes the government has done that and has been very burdensome on their regulatory aspects. So far, we've had very good success working with the government. There's the main agency that we work with is the FAA's Office of Commercial Space Transportation, which kind of oversees the licensing, the permitting, and the testing evaluation of the spacecraft. And they are really working well with the commercial sector to get these vehicles up and flying and in a safe and efficient manner. I mean, safety is the paramount issue for everyone, for all concerned. And if there's any way we can make the industry safer, that's what we're going to do. And we don't frown upon those kind of regulatory. Those are the easy hurdles, but it's the bigger hurdles that we don't want to encounter and everything like that. And so far, the government has been good to us, and we work closely with NASA and other agencies that lessons learned on how the business, how the science of it has evolved, and how we can be smarter about it.
Yeah. How does NASA feel about the whole program generally? I mean, do they feel like they're the kid who's been put in the closet, and the society is allowing the private sector to deal with this, or is it more collaborative? Are they also seemingly excited about the prospect of having privatized spaceflight?
I think you have to look. There's many NASAs, and let's just look at it from old NASA and new NASA. And the old NASA wanted it all. They wanted to do everything. They wanted the moon, the Mars, the solar system, and deep space exploration, do it all. But the new NASA realizes the reality of it is that you can only do so much with $18 billion a year, and space is hard and space is expensive. And so the reception that we have gotten from NASA is that we'll do the hard stuff. We'll do the deep space exploration. We'll, explore way beyond LEO, low Earth orbit. But the private commercial sector, they can bring up resupply the space station. They can with cargo as well as eventually with people in the next 2 years. So it's been a good partnership between NASA and the commercial companies on what missions and what roles each other plays. And just recently, the NASA Administrator Charlie Bolden has come out and said, that hey, the commercial space sector, they're going to be helping us out in the deep missions as well, as they have been. I mean, NASA's not building all this stuff; it's commercial companies that are building the rockets and building the satellites, and it's how they procure and how they go about acquiring these systems, and NASA knows they have to be more efficient, and I think they have been.
Yeah. It seems like so much of this is just purely a resources issue. It's not that the going to Mars or sending more people up into space are impossible. It's just a matter of how much money is available. You mentioned earlier that during the 60s when we did the impossible and sent a man to the moon, basically in a decade, the budget for NASA was something like upwards of 10 to 15% of the entire national budget. What were the circumstances that allowed the society at that time to permit so much money to go into a program like that, and why don't we have that anymore now?
I think people looked at it as a national pride, but you could also weigh the national security interest that went with it, and sometimes in our society, national security has no boundaries, on what we spend on it, and I say this as a veteran, 25 years with the Army, so I know firsthand the importance that national security plays, but it also there's a huge cost on it. I think just in today's society that just the dollars aren't there. There's so many needs, and also you ask the general public, what are the most important things? What should the government be doing? And as much as NASA is extremely popular with the American population, it's not like in the list. I mean, they want health care, they want affordable college, they want environmental things, and unfortunately space comes in about 8th or 9th on that list. Yeah. So I think that the reliance on the commercial side of the house and the private investors, it's a healthy one.
Mm-hmm. Most of the companies that we've been talking about tonight are seemingly American companies, maybe with the exception of Virgin Galactica. Is there a reason why it is that companies like that come to the U.S. to build their companies to try to take people up into space? Or am I mistaken, and perhaps there are other such programs and other such companies elsewhere in the world and other countries doing something similar?
It's the simple reason because they can. Virgin came. I know Virgin. Branson being British. I mean, they came to America on the heels of the X Prize. Or Spaceship One, or they launched. They won the $10 million X Prize, and he saw that the regulatory framework was right in America. That the burdens and barriers were not there, and plus you had investors that were willing to take a chance here. So I know other countries are very interested, and there's very intelligent people there all around the world that are very interested in space. I think Australia, and Great Britain and everything, but a lot of resources, a lot of facilities, a lot of expertise is here in the United States. We have a company from Sweden, Spaceport Sweden, that are doing really interesting things at the very, very top of Sweden, where they're launching suborbital rockets and everything, and just tremendous excitement over in Europe. So, believe it or not, and this sounds like shocking, but it's easier to do things here in the U.S. in a lot of ways. And a lot of people are looking at the regulatory framework that we're setting up here in the U.S. and the job that the FAA is doing to regulate these industries. And there's a sense of security. There's a sense of safety. I mean, would you want to start up a business in Russia or China these days? India's got a burgeoning space economy, but it's starting up. Right. So, the United States has always been the place of innovation and capitalism and business sense and an opportunity. Yeah.
And what is it about our regulation that works, aside from the safety, aside from the capitalistic society? What is it about the framework for setting up space companies that does work? There's always going to be bureaucracy, but what are the things that that we do that help us? Is it that we focus on safety and then allow people to basically do whatever they want, or what is it?
I think it's fair. It's reasonable.
Yeah.
It's set forth. You know what to expect, and you have a say in it. You have a say in the process, and we as an organization are able to work with our companies to say, hey, this is how we would like to see this framework set up, and we think this is in the best interest, safety, as well as to build a commercial marketplace.
Right.
And by and large, we've had good success working with these federal agencies on doing so. Sometimes other governments, I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but they're unpredictable, and the word bureaucracy sometimes has a negative connotation, but sometimes having the stability of a bureaucracy makes the whole system even stronger, because you know what to expect. The regime change that all of a sudden everyone, all the subject matter experts are out the door, and you got someone who doesn't know which end of the rocket is up. So that's why I think, and it's United States leadership, and I think still plays a great part in it.
And looking into the future, the next 5, 10, 15 years, what would, from CSF's perspective, what would they deem to be a successful future over the near term? What sort of things would happen, or what would they envision the future looking like they would deem successful?
I would give me a crystal ball for 10 years out. I would like to, very active commercial spaceports around the country, routinely flying payloads and passengers into space safely. I would see space commerce taking off and doing things that right now I couldn't even tell you what they might be doing. And we have a company that is setting up prospector satellites that are landing on asteroids and mining on these asteroids to find precious metals like platinum. If you can bring back a couple pounds of platinum, at what's it, 1,500? I don't even know what it costs an ounce. I bought a ring once, but it's the opportunities and the business models that you haven't even thought about. This company here in San Francisco, Planet Labs, what they're doing of taking this Earth imagery, and getting it down to the users on the ground in near real time, to have this highly accurate and visible remote sensing imagery, and they can build these satellites in a week or 10 days, and building a constant. So there's no telling what the business model will be in 10 years, and I think now is an exciting time with the kind of the forward motion that, as we spoke earlier, the innovation that SpaceX is doing and the success that they have. As you and I know, being from the Northeast, the snowplow effect. They're really plowing the way forward and opening up new avenues, for what other companies can do and will do. And I think the 10-year crystal ball, I hate to say, if you ask me what's going to happen in 1 year, it'd be a lot more limited. But I think in 5 and 10 years, I just think we're going to see tremendous growth in this industry. And there's a lot of investors in it, and these investors are all. This is like the mecca of space investors out here in the San Francisco area, and I think there's a notion of that they don't want to be left out, and fear of not being one of the early folks in it. And that's why we're seeing that this influx of capital investment to a lot of these companies. Skybox, is one of them here, just up in Mountain View, where their neighbor, across the freeway, Google, said, "Wow, we think that's a pretty awesome idea that you have going on," and just took a major stake. Well, bought them, so clearly a full stake in the company. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for companies, innovative companies with these great ideas, and investors to see these things through.
Last question I want to ask you. We were talking about little kids and little kids' dreams, and kids when they're young and they hear about these ideas and they get so excited. Young kids today that are 5, 10 years old and they're just learning about these things, do you think there's a reasonable expectation, if you were a betting man or if you had to bet on whether it was likely or unlikely that in their lifetime they would be able to reasonably afford to be able to send themselves up or their family up in space? Do you think that's probable, or do you think that's still very, very unlikely to happen.
I think it's really probable. From what I'm seeing, I've tried to do this thing where I get out to as many as of the companies that we represent to actually see what they're doing, to see engineers bending metal and building spacecraft. And with the innovation out there and the ideas and the progress that we've had, I have a 9-year-old, 8-year-old boy and a 4-year-old daughter, and I really see that in their lifetime, the opportunities that they have will if in space, will far exceed anything that I've had in my lifetime. I like to think I still got a lot of life left in me, but I think there's no limit for what possibilities lie ahead for them, and I'm optimistic about that. And I'm excited too that I think there is that space is becoming sexy again, and I think that there's a long time where it was dull and it just was distant to too many people, and it was out of the reach of too many people. And I don't think people see it that way anymore. And I think it's people see a possibility, and they see their dreams possibly coming to fruition. And if not them, their children. And I see this. Fortunately, I see this with a lot of teachers. The teachers that I see, my own children and my nieces and nephews, and how they're so into space, and how they want the patches and the buttons and the stickers and all the stuff that goes with it. And I think space is cool again, and I think that's fantastic. So,
Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dan. This was great. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks for listening. If you're interested in learning more about The Exchange, want to listen to episodes online, or would like to reach out to the show, feel free to visit the show's website at theexchangeshow.com.